to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Some call me Radio Rob Lee. I don't know if we're going to get that over, but, give it a shot. So today, I am super excited to welcome my next guest for my conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. My next guest is a multimedia artist working in paint, sculpture, animation, film, digital video, sound art, puppetry, and performance. Please welcome Pierre Bennu. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. I'm happy to be here. This is dope.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And this is a thing that I've been, and maybe it's the quality of individual I've been interviewing in recent days, but I feel like every day that I've done a recording, I've had someone who's been wearing glasses. So check out my bespectacled brother on the other end. I love it. Thank you for wearing your glasses.
Listen, I got to show up how I am. Farsighted. All right.
And deep astigmatism, big astig Rob. That's what it is. So as we start off, I like to give folks the space. I do my intro and I have, my pieces here and there. And literally it comes from an amalgamation on what's online and so on. But I find that often something is left out. It might be a big breadcrumb about the person that they're like, yeah, this is really a big piece of my story. So I'm going to lobby it over to you. If you will, could you start off by introducing yourself in your own words? This is how we set the tone, right? And tell us about your work just as we start off here.
Wow. My name is Pierre Bennu. I see, this is where it gets funky. I am a multidisciplinary artist. Yeah. But I've been told by my boys, just say artist, right? Because my work just falls under so many umbrellas and you can place it where you need to. I've been, my work spans decades and a lot of it focuses on love, joy, revolution, process, and transformation. And so, that's me in a nutshell. Right now, I've been focusing as far as what arts I've been kind of in touch with of recent, a lot of animation, a lot of illustration, short film formats, experimental, and puppetry. A lot of puppetry. I've been getting back into that bag. So,
yeah. So yeah, it's some people say multi-hyphenate. It's multiple things, but artists, I like that. I like that. Just like artist, capital A.
It's succinct.
Yeah. So going back and having sort of this. Well, not even so. This multifaceted, this very robust identity creatively, right? Could you share an experience that left like one of those indelible marks, maybe one of those early experiences? I think a lot of times when we're looking at sort of going deep and kind of thinking through, like, all right, when did I realize like I like poetry, or when did I realize I like puppetry or performance? So thinking back, is there an experience that comes to mind that left a mark on you that shows up in your work?
Well, early on, I wasn't very verbal, right? So a lot of my communication to the world was through art. Yeah. The affirmation that I found early on was growing up in New York and being inspired by graffiti, right? So being small and seeing these giant murals that were created that weren't there yesterday and that are created the next day and it might not last a week. Yeah. And then the story of these people who have to steal materials or take them or borrow them, they create this plan that risks their life, their literal life, to create this artwork against the odds. And then just how that art, like how Spider-Man is like red and blue, right? Against a gray background, it pops. And so New York in the early 80s was that. It was destitute. It was left for dead. And then in the middle of that, you see this bright, amazing piece. And what also hit me is about the people who did them, right? These were teenagers for the most part. In art, oftentimes it's the piece and then someone signs the bottom, right? That's there. But in this art, the signature was the big thing. The signature, my name was the art. It was such a bold kind of pronouncement of self. I'm here, I exist. And I mean, that thing, that, this is weird, that, and if you go to New York, you'll see these grates. Yeah. Through those grates, sometimes you'll see plants coming through.
Yeah.
that was also an inspiration to me. Like those plants had seeds in the worst filth, but somehow through those grates and the heat, found a way to come through those grates and exist. And those two things early on were huge landmark inspirations for me, like how things can be done. There's a way, you can find a way. So, that always affirmed me in my creative process early on.
That's dope. It's when I think of that, as you were describing it, the gesticulation, it helps. You described the second part of it, like growing through. It is, to me, it speaks to like perseverance or what have you. And this is, I've had conversations with folks, and it's like, your creative identity. It's like, you can't separate the two. Art, life, they go together. And one of those things is the perseverance component. Like, what's that thing that people say? Oh, well, to be an overnight success, you have to put this many years in already.
Right.
And that speaks to that perseverance thing, or even when you're in the middle of working through something. I think creatives, artists, folks that pursue a creative endeavor are problem solvers. And that the thing about it is being able to persevere. You're troubleshooting. You're trying to figure out a way to make it work. It's like, I have this in my head. I want to make this in this way. How do I get it out there? So your website reads, I turn love into art. And keep me on point, because sometimes I botch it. I turn love into art and art into medicine. Can you speak on the meaning of this?
Okay, so that for me has to do with the healing power of creativity, of creation, right? I had so I had an art space. And when I got the art space, I kind of did not know what to do with myself, right? I got overwhelmed with almost guilt. Like, I had jobs, right? That's fine. But like, as an artist, it was like striking a wet match. I couldn't get inspired. So I sat in that room, and just this wave of depression kind of hit me. And I said, you know what? Do something. And so I started with 5 minutes a day. And I was like, all right, 5 minutes. And I said, I'm gonna use my non-dominant hand, and I'm gonna work in a medium that I'm not familiar with. So there's no ego involved. If I have a timer for 5 minutes, I hit that, something is done. I did something in this space that has value. It doesn't have value. I give it value because of who I am, right? So I started doing that. And 5 minutes became 10, became 25. And then I just started beasting out. And that really helped inform my work for clients and myself. Fast forward to the pandemic, I was able to kind of shorten, chop, codify a lot of those basic building block ideas into an online class.
Sure.
And it really, I got to really see how both professional artists and people who have been kind of not in the art world, they don't consider themselves artists, tap back into that creative spirit. And that's where the medicine part comes in for me, right? I was like, wow, okay, on top of telling stories or, whatever it is that we tend to use art for, right? Oftentimes a commodity, oftentimes to just cut and sell. This thing also has healing properties, right? It has, and it time travels. I've seen people tap back into who they were as children. I've seen people be able to plan ahead for the future in ways they hadn't thought of prior, because now their creative atrophy, they're hitting the bag now.
Yeah.
And so that healing part, turning the love, the art into medicine, that's what that's in reference to.
That's beautiful. It's and I see it in in my sort of data. This is my craft. This is my practice. And when I'm not doing it, or if I'm spending too much time away from it, I don't feel good. I get headaches. My stomach's hurting. It's like that thing that damn someone like, my ass starting to itch. She's like, all right.
Sorry.
But it's one of those things where you're not fully realizing your full personhood, especially when you're pursuing something creatively, or even when, like, I'm an Aquarius, and I realized
Me too.
You get it, gang.
I already get it.
So it's this thing where it's the claustrophobia thing that pops up, and it's like, yo, you
Mm,
have to work in this style in this way,
right.
period. I can't do it. So you mentioned working and getting those reps in, but
Mm-hmm.
working with the non-dominant hand. I used to do this thing when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot more sort of in-person interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I would forget a piece of my gear so I can MacGyver that joint. I would forget
Right.
something intentionally. It's like, oh, I don't have the questions on me. And then it turns
Wow.
into an improvised conversation. Still works because it makes me have to prepare, makes me have to be on.
Mm, right.
There are certain things at a minimum that I need. I need the reporting interface. I need, the other person there. But
Mm,
there's other things. It's just like troubleshoot, problem solve. Let's make it happen. You're going to get this interview. And
right.
that's how it goes. So in thinking about like, having this super diverse and rich background, like, multiple mediums, multiple disciplines, can you share like what drives you to embrace such a wide variety? Like, is it sort of, I want to make this. This is the part of the sort of, tool belt, if you will, of disciplines and mediums in which you work in, or is it what sometimes people would say for our ilk, man, y'all
Mm-hmm.
get bored, y'all move to another thing. What is it more like?
Yo, it's twofold, right? It is boredom. I'm gonna put that right there. That's real. I get bored. I'm like, once you kind of know the pattern,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I can get past this board. So you have to I find that if I switch it up, the thing that I'm doing that's new tends to inform the thing that I'm comfortable with.
Mhm.
Right. So that for me is almost necessary for just how I create at this point. And also, I have these ideas, right? I feel as though sometimes you have to audition the idea in different mediums to figure out what medium best tells that story,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So I have for instance, I'll give you a for instance. I'm looking around my room. There's under one of these paintings is a painting of a canary in a cage near a window
Yeah.
and a pigeon, and in the background you could kind of see the city. All I know is that they're having a conversation about freedom.
Yeah.
This is still an unformed idea. This idea still I haven't figured out what it's going to be yet, but I auditioned it as a story, a
Yeah.
children's story. I auditioned it as a painting. Is this a poem? You know what I'm saying? So I audition it until it finds a medium that goes, oh, snap, that's a short film. Bet. Or that's a stage play, bet. Or if it doesn't fit in any of those, you tuck it away and it might be the highlight of something more grand.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't ignore anything, and I work in many mediums to basically serve the story, right? In what medium best serves this idea. So that's the other reason why I'm working. Is this a collage? Is this, you know what I mean? So yeah.
No, I love it. It's going through like these different filters. It's like, this would work well in this way, but maybe let's look at this. How about that? And it's interesting when like those moments hit you where it's because you're very equipped in working within multiple disciplines that you can actually do that. Where in doing this is storytelling, this is archival work, this is a podcast. And I see when folks have, and especially because I educate in this area now, I see when folks have a very specific siloed idea of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's not what it is. It's something else. It's something that's very far away from it. It's like, well, it needs to be a video. It's like, it can be. What it
Right.
needs to be is sort of the conversation you recording and documenting or whatever at its minimum. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that people speak very passionately about it. And I think in your sort of way, in this specific area, I'm like, look, this could be a short form podcast, long form. This can be video. This can be excerpts. It could be all of these sort of different things, but it's not too far away from this sort of creative expression. But when
Right.
people have this idea that it has to be specifically for this, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it speaks to art generally, almost this, well, it has to be something that can be sold and packaged.
Mm.
That's the thing that, as I look at it, and with this time removed, I started thinking about it like that, and it makes me itch, get the hives.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of, I mean, I think the pandemic kind of turned it to 20,
Yeah.
but it really, there's this thing that I've kind of been going back and forth with all my life, about the dance between commerce and art. And what I've come to is that not everything has to be for sale. Some things can just be for me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I don't have to take a photo of everything. I don't have to, you know what I mean? Like every amazing painting I put together or feel that I think is amazing doesn't have to be sold or share. You know what I mean? Like some things are just for your
Yeah.
spiritual evolution. And I've been trying to pass that on through the classes as well. Just like this is for you. You
Yeah.
could, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of people see art and go, art is for sale because of just how we live, you know what I'm saying? But to your point about these conversations, I've been actively going out with people who are, uh, you know, not quite best friends, but just like acquaintances and being like, yo, I'm gonna be at the coffee shop doing work. You don't have to hang out with me, but that's where I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
We could talk. Let's learn to talk again. So this podcasting thing is dope, but I'm I'm envious of your ability to structure a well-rounded conversation. And
Thank
so I'm again, I love this being a new medium that I kind of keep to myself. I love not knowing and figuring out and failing, but like it's artists, let's
you.
say it like that, like you, that just truly inspire me to be like, okay, two incredible people could sit down and have a conversation and it could be expansive. You know what I'm saying? So anyway.
I appreciate that, and it's definitely one of those things where I look for the challenge, like, and I think one of
Mm,
the other C's that come in is the content piece, where I'm
mm,
not here to sort of make content that's packageable in that way. It's just like I want to have a dope
right.
conversation, and I'll say this, and as self-deprecating as I can be, I like having conversations with people who are more talented and interested than I am, and then I like to share those things with other folks. That's what I do. I was like, yeah, let's put it out there. And I think, people get something out of it without, tooting my own horn or patting myself on the back. But I think it's an interesting conversation. And even in the curation, it's curatorial. And
Mhm.
it's not like I'm reaching out to everyone that picked up a paintbrush and it's like, hey, let's have a
Right.
conversation.
Hmm.
And like I said, before we got started, I was like, I know you're gonna be one of those guys. That's before we even got started. It's just like it's just
Thank
odd.
you.
So, your work, featuring, some of the themes that you touched on. I also see resilience, Black joy as well. Could you discuss a project that comes to mind that really embodies, like, if I put it in wrestling terms. I like wrestling. If you're getting yourself over, right? And like, yo, hey, check out this match. For you,
Mm.
the match, it's like, yo, what's that one piece that's like, you absolutely got to check this one out. Like, we're told that we
Wow.
shouldn't be gassing ourselves up, but sometimes you got to gas yourself. It's like, yo, what's that piece?
um, wow, this is hard. This is hard. I think the piece that most people come back to is a piece a video altarpiece, I like to call it, that I did for the song Sun Moon Child by Imani Azuri.
Mhm.
The idea behind it was that, you know, photographs were new technology that were applied to altarpieces, kind of to connect you to a time gone. I was like, well, what would a future altarpiece look like? And
Mhm.
that's what the idea of this mashup, I guess you call that now, video was. But it's something that people come back to year after year, and people discover year after year, and it just hits them. The response I get from that um, is it warms me because it hits like an altarpiece as opposed to just, oh, it's a really cool thing cut to the music. You know what I mean? And some of the work actually that I did at my residency as a residency artist for BLM and the global networks, Black Futures Month, the pieces I did for them there were some amazing, like, just pieces that I feel like really speak to who I am, right? They talk about healing, they talk about revolution, they talk about growth. Um, yeah, so those pieces in those pieces are included. One of them is an animation meditation loop, which is something that I've been doing for quite some time, but only have recently begun to share with the public at large. So those two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So is there, with having sort of those personal themes, and I heard, I heard 2020 mentioned a couple of times, and that was definitely one of those, obviously one of those years. And even looking
Mm,
at this from a sort of creative standpoint, this is when this kind of blew up. Like this existed sort of pre 2020, but
mhm,
for maybe 6 months, and then we were into 2020, but then multiple interviews, multiple people listening, checking it out, and it became more of a known thing. And
mhm,
I think just kind of being away from it, you know, being away from sort of constantly being out there, constantly being bombarded with all of these messages. We're inside and bombarded in a different way, but
mhm,
because a lot of us are at home, I know I'm able to explore
mhm.
sort of this process at that time. I've been podcasting for 11 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I know how to do this.
Mm,
Being able to maybe do it differently and think about it differently of like,
right.
oh, I'm putting this out there and I'm booking people. And it's not just me and my friends, talking about movies and stuff.
Mm.
I'm doing something a bit different. So talk a bit about sort of your process and how perhaps it has evolved over time. Now, granted, you're working in every medium. I was like, what's the new one that you just came up with? You're working in all of them. But talk about in sort of in as general as you would like, or as specific you would like, sort of how your process has evolved over, time.
I've been able to separate what's for me, and what's for the public and what's for, you know, I guess I want to say the corporate, but when you're hired to do a job, yeah.
Sure.
I've been blessed to be able to say no, uh, as I'm getting up in age, I'm of a big age, as they say. So I can more easily be able to look at a project and go, nah, it's not worth the money for me to do that thing with my name on it. Yeah. Um, but knowing what's for me creatively and being secure in that really frees me up when I work with other people, because now I'm like, okay, I could just use whatever skill set I've sharpened to just be completely egoless and say, let's do what best serves this narrative. Let's go. You know what I mean? I could come in as a pure artist, if
Yeah.
you will, in service to the story. So I think I've just kind of sharpened and evolved in that way. I know it's mine. I know what's for sharing.
No, I think that's really good. And a piece of advice that I got just last week, actually, by
Mm.
every now and again, I'll look at people's credentials, and I know that they're credentials. I'm confident in what I do and all of that stuff. But at the same time, sometimes I'm like, how the hell did I get this person? How did I get this person to say yes? And dude gave me a really good piece of advice. His interview's not out yet, so that's why I'm not mentioning it. But
Okay.
he was just like, just stick with your authentic voice. Stick with the thing
Mm,
that you do. He's like, that's you. He's like, all of the other stuff. He's like, sure. He's like, and those people that are doing the thing that is kind of fake, that's not really them. That's
mm,
for them to do.
right.
So it's kind of being able to understand like what's for me. What should I be
Mm,
doing? It might, what is it? The whole comparison still joy thing. But
right.
I think there's some validity in it, and you can't help but do it. And sometimes people reinforce it, especially in certain communities. We're very tight. It's very
Mhm,
close proximity, right? But when it's something that feels true and you're doing it, I think, quote unquote, for the right reasons, you're able to
mhm,
easily make those lines, delineate, and figure out like, why are you doing this again? And the thing that you said a second ago about sort of the money piece, and
mhm,
the thing that I've gotten really comfortable with recently
mhm.
is figuring out a way to say no. And it's like, does it fit? Is the way that I go about it. And
Right.
like by the time this interview drops, I'll be closer and closer to 800 episodes.
Mm,
So
wow.
my mindset is I don't need to audition anymore.
Right.
And it's just like here's my whole portfolio, if you will. Now, if we want to talk about something in a different way, I'm happy to do that. But sort of the, conversation that feels a little exploitative that
Mm,
leads into that audition, I don't know if I really want that. Or
right.
certain opportunities that on paper may look pretty interesting. It might pay a certain dollar amount, and then it has to pass this other thing. It's the what's this book I dove back into yesterday, Death of the Artist. Uh,
Mm.
and if you haven't, you should check it out. Definitely, I'm an audiobook guy, but
Oh, I'm writing it down right now. Go
in one of the chapters, he's
ahead.
talking about, and this is like from 2020, so it's not that long
Okay.
ago. And he's talking about sort of it's this infographic that this, I think her name is Jennifer Hesh, that she came up with of should I do this job? Basically, should I work for free or should I do this job and so on? And
Mm,
that filtering that's done there. And
right.
that's been really helpful for me of determining
Mm,
like, does this fulfill me? Sure. Like the thing I was mentioning earlier about teaching, that's not a thing that I do, but
right.
it was a rewarding opportunity and I got so much out of it. So I was like, oh, okay, on paper, maybe you should spend your time doing something else. How many podcasts could you do during that time? How does it affect sort of the flow of your creative pursuit? But
Right.
as I think about it, it's like, well, this actually can fit into my creative pursuit in this way. If I'm talking to folks and I'm, in a sense, sharing and helping to share the stories with this sort of like mechanism, these questions and all, I'm
Mm,
informing and I'm kind of teaching somebody something to people listening, perhaps.
right.
And it's, a podcast. So it's all of those things. So in teaching, it's kind of the same thing. I'm teaching how to podcast, doing all of these things. So it's like, oh, it fits. I'm riding this wave and it fits.
Right. I find that studying our heroes
Mm,
and reading between the lines really helps. Finding the humanity in them, understanding the L's they took and the gaps in space, because they don't talk about the gaps, right?
yeah.
You have someone like Sidney Poitier, and we just see him as this actor who was excellent, right? But like we don't talk about him, living in a broom closet and kind of trying to get rid of his accent and the decades of like the L's, right? We
Mhm.
talk about, James Baldwin, Paul Robe, like we could go down the line. Nina Simone, like we don't talk about her in the clubs just playing these tunes that she didn't necessarily want. Like, we have to learn to humanize our heroes to find where we fit into that narrative.
Mm.
Because we're living a narrative that people are going to look back on and they're only going to be like, oh, look at all the wonderful things that this person did. But they're not going to speak about these moments where you said, yo, that looked good on paper, but you know what I'm saying? I'm sure James Baldwin turned down mad stuff
Yeah.
as, you know, Toni Morrison, like I'm sure these people have turned down amazing things to be them, but at the end of the day what was for them was for them. And I do believe in that level of destiny. Like you couldn't have turned their narrative any other way, but in the living of it there's no way to know, you
And,
know.
and that's one of the reasons when I added like the first, like maybe season, maybe two seasons of this pod, there was no
Mm,
questions around sort of the rapid fire. The rapid fire are these questions that I'm curious about that don't necessarily fit into tell me your art story, if you will, right?
right.
It's just like who's the person that's behind it? What are those like little breadcrumbs that are there? Like when you talk to someone, like what is it? The sort of artist habits, you hear these different things. It's like, yo, whenever I finish a painting, I make sure I get a croissant. That's an interesting detail that
Right.
misses sort of the minutia of the person, but it's probably a big thing for them. Like, so that's one of the reasons why I incorporate that in there to, in a way, respond to that sort of people are commodities. It's like, no, they're people. They
Right.
make this work, but they're people. That's.
Right.
Moving into like sort of this next question, let's talk a bit about Exit the Apple and sort of your role, the story around that. And I have like a sub question there, but I at least want to start out by opening up that part of the conversation.
Wow. Okay, so Exit the Apple has been, well, first of all, it's just one way of saying living and creating outside of the box. Like people always ask me, what does Exit the Apple mean? There's a big long meaning, but that's basically it. Yeah. And it's been many things over the 30 plus years that I've been using that name. Currently, we're into like lifestyle branding. We're into kind of supporting the creative mind, getting more people to kind of tap into, again, that art, that creative self that kind of is atrophied over time. So a lot of the work that we've been producing on this side has kind of just been, how do you inspire from a core place?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? How do you, and it gets harder because of how I feel divided conversation, at least online, has been. But I kind of want to tap into something basic, primal, and inspired. You know what I mean? I want it like seeing, like I was talking about, seeing those plants come through the grates. How can I get people to just get there? You know what I mean? See something and go, I know how that fits into my life. And it might hit you different 3 years from now or 2 years from now, you know what I mean? But it's the same piece of art. How can it be sustainable, reusable, and inspirational? And so that's kind of what we've been focusing on of late. That's kind of what the moniker of Exit the Apple is kind of had under its umbrella right now. That's the kind of thing that we're kind of aimed towards, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. And when, you said 30, right? So that's podcast on here, but when you talk about sort of something that's very much sort of like, using this term for lack of a better term, like one's baby, and it's like very much aligned with a personal vision. What are those considerations when you're seeking maybe collaborations, when you're working within sort of a team or anything that's external from you, but that's driving sort of the vision forward? As I see that all the time, like I do this, and when I'm trying to bring in someone, the fit has to be there. It's like you might be really good at what you do, but we may not have that sort of shared vision. Or even when I bring folks on for an interview, like I look at this as a collaborative thing. Like if, let's say I came in here with a wild energy, like, can you bring it down like by 5, my guy? Or if it was just a non-match. So speak on that a bit, as sort of the considerations when it comes to, so at times, the collaborative nature of things, especially when it's an individual's vision starting off.
Well, I mean, Exit the Apple, essentially, at least right now, is primarily me. So that's the fun part, but it's also the huge stressor. As far as things fitting the vision and collaborative pieces, it's like you said, it's a conversation. You know what I mean? And to what we were talking about before, I had a friend of mine who used to say to me, and she was talking about relationships, but I've used this to apply to many things, is that there are no secrets. People tell you exactly who they are, and you choose to either listen to them or ignore them to get to whatever it is you feel you want to get to. Oh. And I find that with artistic collaborations, there's no dance, and and after a real solid, sincere conversation, whether this relationship, because that's what it is for the time of the collaboration, whether it can move forward or not, because it moves forward with you, right? You don't have to move it forward. You know what I'm saying? So I've been blessed over the past, maybe really since the art space closed in 2018, that I've been really blessed with people that I've collaborated with that have really kind of gotten the vision. And you've been around as long as I've been around, people are like, I know what you do. And so that energy kind of is my billboard. Yeah. It speaks for me in respects. So by the time we have that conversation, there's usually a shorthand there. I do my research on everybody. If we talking, trust. I've done all the, you know what I'm saying? What's that? What's this person like? I've done the whole thing already. So I've done my research, and my works However they came in contact with me, which is wild because, they could have met me, performing. They could have met, seen my work at a museum. Like, I don't know how they're coming to me, but however they met me, I'm like, okay, that's you. Boom. That's my billboard to you. That's how we communicate. We have a shorthand now. Let's talk about if this project works for us and how best we can serve that vision.
That's similar to I did this interview because I do so many, right? And I did this interview with Sean Peters, and it took a while.
That's my man.
Yeah, it took a while to like figure it out, and we ended up making it happen, right? And it's like, yo, how did I become aware of you again? And he's like, I don't know. Like, I was like, I'm happy. Like, the work is great. I'm looking forward to chatting. But it was one of those things I was trying to remember, but it was a good thing. It's like, you're a New York guy. He's like, I am. And I was like, Philly, right? He's like, I'm in Baltimore, bro. I was like, which makes it even funnier. So, probably about 2 months ago, I actually saw him in person, and neither of us were supposed to be where we were at the time. We were meeting up with one of my, we were getting sandwiches at this spot. My buddy was making sandwiches there for this pop-up, and I happened to see him, and I was like, I know you. He's like, I know you as well. And, it was cool to meet in person. That means it's a continuation, because when I do this, what my aim is, and I came to this conclusion last week. I know I was telling you about the New York thing a little bit before that started, and encountering my people up there. Like, I don't see them regularly, and encountering them, and I was just like, oh, right, we're friends. And that's the thing that I'm really trying to reason through, because, in theory, each person I've interviewed, we should be, friendly or what have you, but that's not always the case. You can think that this collaborative thing that we did went really well. And, people are coming on here sometimes sharing really intimate details. I had an interview last week with a fellow Aquarius, and we were talking about some heavy stuff. And it's rare that there are emotions on this podcast, like teary emotions. It was some heavy stuff. And we were able to get through the full thing. And she was like, thank you for being vulnerable in this interview as well. And that's not a thing I actually hear in real life. So I was like, but when we wrapped it, she was like, yeah, we're friends now. She was like, I shed tears in your podcast. We're friends now. And I was like, so that's my aim. You know what I mean? And it's building that. So it's collaborative. If I'm rooting for anyone that I've had on here, that's the way I look for it. You know what I mean? And that's just what that is, and that's what that driver is.
Wow.
So I got two more real questions. One of them I moved into rapid fire because I think it fits better there. So I got two more questions for you.
I'm trying so hard not to overshare, by the way. I'm
no.
I'm toning it way down.
Look, man, sometimes when I'm talking to people I haven't talked to in a while, I'm like, all right, I need to bring this thing down.
Right.
Because I'm like, look, you got 3 hours? You know what I
mean? Right.
So, and I had this, I think I had this conversation came from, in a sense, this conversation I had with Jeffrey Kent a couple years ago. And we were talking about sort of the artist life. So, aside from like making work, describe the most satisfying aspect of your creative life.
Wow. Okay. So this question, it's I think the most satisfying thing for me is the continuation of the conversation that I had with myself, right? Hearing back from people how they perceive the work or how they met the work. Yeah. That for me, in this big age, earlier on, I was just like, I was just putting stuff out. I was like, all of me out. Like, you know what I mean? And there's part of me that still does that. I feel like I'm on the clock. I'm like, I ain't going to get everything done before I die. So let me, so, but, hearing back from people who were like in college, who were like, yo, when I was 15, I came in contact with your work here and it did this to me. I'm like, what? Or, I wrote about your piece in this, like, it's seeing all of that come back to you and the conversations and the, because they're like children you let off into college. You've trained them, you've done everything you do, you put them out in the world, and then people have their relationship with your work, and just the privilege of hearing some of those relationships has been my latest joy as far as creating work. Because sometimes you just, let me say this, I create work regardless of money. I shouldn't even say that, but I have to, like you were talking about earlier, I have to get it off.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, big or small, I throw it out into the void. I hope someone hears it. I hope someone sees it or comes in contact with it, but I have to get it off. The fact that I hear back something, anything from the void is just a super blessing. It's a super blessing. I know what that means now.
Yeah.
You
know? When folks chime in and they reach out and they say, "Oh no, I'm aware of what you do." And it's like, I know, and it's people who are higher up. Again, like sometimes it's like I shoot the shot. Like I call it creative ignorance sometimes of like, yeah, I'm supposed to go through. Nah, I ain't doing that. I'm not going through this gatekeeper. I'm going directly to the source. It's like, yo, I saw you in that coffee shop. So, bro, you like cortados, right? Let me treat you to one. I do this podcast. You know, here's a bing bang boom. Then we're doing a pod. You know, that's how the thing goes. Or, you know, the thing that I run into on occasion is not knowing if I fit or where I fit, but still it's like as you describing sort of growing through the grades, right? It's like I fit. I'm gonna figure out a way to fit. I'm gonna figure out a way to be here. So, you know, that trip I was describing to New York,
right?
I went there last year. It was my crime alley, right? I was like, yeah, I'm at this art show. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know who to talk to and so on. And last year was slightly better than the year before. This was the third year I've gone. This time I went there pretentious. My glasses were tiny. My scarf was big. Actually, I had an ascot on. I had a Shiba Inu ascot and some expensive cropped pants. I was like, yo, I feel wild. But I got the most networking I've ever done there done.
Wow.
And I think I booked like 7 interviews when I was up there. And that was sort of just like one, being comfortable with it, but you know, sort of doing this and trying to carve a niche or a lane for myself. That's the thing that's been so interesting. And this is the thing that I use before I move into this final question. This is the thing that I use as an Aquarius, and then kind of describing this whole arc. I just call it riding the wave.
Yeah.
So lastly, this is the one right here. This is the one I'm very, very interested about.
Oh man.
And you know, it speaks to sort of one of the themes that's come up a couple of times in this conversation. So lastly, you know, it's almost never enough funds, never enough opportunities. Opportunities feel scarce. And I think that's sort of like we're working on something new, unique, but at times people might want to put it in a box. It might be a bit challenging to get it out there, right? How do you stay the course and trust your creative voice? Is it sort of time served? Is it that innate trust? What is it in staying the course and trusting your creative voice?
Well, part of it, like I said earlier, I have to just get it off. Yeah. So I have to find a way, or if I don't find a way, it gets heavy. You know what I'm saying? I'm learning that I can't, at this big age, I cannot carry the weight. I'm like, yo, I can't. I'm sitting on books and stories from 15, 20 years ago, 5 years, like, figure it out. Even if you do it in a pad, just get it out of you so that you can let the new stuff in, yeah? But the thing that sets the fire underneath me is that I have to create evidence, right? The persons that need my work the most, or that it's going to make sense to the most, might not be born yet. I may never meet that person or those persons, right? Think about how many artists created work and had people in their time had no idea who they were. And then 100 years later, immediately after they died, 50 years later, you know what I mean? Like, you have to create evidence. I joke with my partner all the time. I tell her, I'm like, because sometimes you get in those moods, like, does anybody see what I'm doing? I said, maybe I should just quit, and then I'll be like that woman who, used to be in the church, and they didn't know she painted, and then she passed away, and then when they went in their attic, they found all these like masterpieces. Maybe that's what's gonna happen. But it's like, part of the fire that keeps me going, that keeps me like, you have to figure this out, is that it's in you for a reason. It chose you, and you, for the person that 100 years from now, it has to exist. It has to exist for someone to find it. And so that's the fire for me, at least one of the driving forces. It has to exist to be found. And it could always be done better. It could always be shiny later. You know what I'm saying? But get it out of your body and into a realm where someone else can share it.
Yeah. No, that's good. And it makes me think of an idea that I will share with you after don't let me forget it. I'll share with you after this. But it is this other thing. And I'll close on this before I go to these rapid fire questions. Like my partner, she's from Brooklyn. And as she talks about,
Brooklyn. All right, sorry.
probably know each other. And it's one of those things where, we were, it was a couple years ago, it was a Christmas holiday, and we were in Jersey with her family. And I'm the only non-Jersey, New York person. I'm the only person that, like, I think there that does something creative, or one of the few that does something creative. So, I'm the youngest person there too. That's the other thing.
Wow.
So about all of these things, they're like, yeah, so Baltimore, tell us about it. And I'm like, why am I here being a representative of Baltimore? And she chimes in, and she was like, Baltimore's Brooklyn before it became a Shake Shack. I'm like, yo, and it's a thing there. It's something true there where in the idea where when we're protecting, archiving culture, that's what I want this to be a part of. It's not going to be the best conversations, the most robust conversations, the comprehensive conversation. It's a conversation that documents a moment in time. So to your point about what's discovered, they're capturing these are these years when this person was doing these interviews. If you want to get a sense of it, you'll get the through lines. You'll hear it. You'll hear some of the same questions. You'll hear some of the same sentiments, but it's sort of an authentic thing that captures culture through these particular areas during this time frame. Wow. And I think that goes away at times where, you look at it and you're like, man, remember when this used to be like this? No. But yeah, I think that's the thing. And so when we, it's almost you'll like this. It's like, remember when we dollar slices? It's like, well, those don't exist anymore. That's a piece of culture is what I'm getting at.
Right. Wow. There was just all right. So there were these films that were just released. They're almost 100 years old. And they're these black studios, black film studios from they're silent films. Yeah. And what's amazing about them, right? Because some were produced by the church because the church had money. So there's people in devil costumes chasing people because they're listening to jazz music. and then there's like produced films, right? Where like these, they're like action films. It's like, I fly a plane, da, 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 and they're chasing each other in these and it looks, you could tell it's someone fanning smoke. What's wonderful about those films, though, is that every once in a while, the camera will kind of be in a position where you just see regular everyday life, people just walking across the street. Yeah. And it's those little bits that you go, oh, I know the ephemera. I know like that shoe is in a museum or the way they buckle up their jacket, but that's how they walked in it.
Yeah.
That's what the swag looked like. That's how they, what I'm saying? This is the living piece, right? This is a piece of now that cannot be replaced or replicated, right? They could make a documentary or a film about this, right? I don't know who's playing you. I don't know who's playing me, but they're not going to get this moment down. Like this is encapsulated. This is forever. This cannot be replicated. So this is, I don't know. This is just magic. And I just wanted you to hold that because this is what you're doing matters is what I'm getting to.
No, I appreciate it. And, I had this bit on this podcast that I used to do. We were joking about, I think it was right after Chadwick Boseman passed. And I was just like, yo, we just have to find the new black guy that's going to play every other black guy in these biopics. So me and my buddy were joking. I was like, so who plays? I was like, yo, we just get the same guy who plays both of us because we can't pick more. He and I look nothing alike. I was like, that'll be the bet. That'll be the bet. Um, so in these final moments, I want to move into sort of these rapid fire questions. And, as I tell everyone, I always like to give the disclaimer, if you will. Don't omit these. It's kind of like, look, I said what I said. That's just what it is. Bong, bong. All right. You notice how I put the bong, bong in there. So here's the first one. I think to be balanced, and I kind of gotten this off of you during the crux of this conversation and the research, self-care is a thing. So is there a self-care practice that you regularly engage in?
Yeah, I the class that I teach, that I tend to teach on weekends or whenever I have the chance now, it's not as regular as it used to be. I do that practice pretty much every day. So it's very minimalist. It asks very little of me, but it's hitting the bag creatively. Yeah. And I just recently created a deck for creatives, and that has become part of my like morning, midday ritual as well. It's just pulling cards that are just affirmations and quotes to kind of tap into the things I need to kind of keep me going. And the deck is called Dear Artists, and we just dropped it in February. And that has been, it's just been a cheat code. Yeah. It's a cheat code.
It's dope. So this one is sort of interesting. This is a relatively new one I've added. Could you name a piece of media, TV, book, play, but something in that sort of that class of media where it doesn't get the respect it always should? Like people are like, movies aren't nothing. TV shows, it's like, it's not the fine arts, it's not theater. That a piece of media that really captured your perspective on art, or even your, but even your creative discipline. Like when, when I first saw Mo Better Blues, I saw late. It's a lot of things that I've seen late,
Wow.
But it's one of those things where I was like, oh, now I feel like I'm in the scene with these guys. I was like, I wish I still had hair so I can John Carlo my joint, but but is there a piece of media that comes to mind for you?
Wow. I had so many ways I could have went with this question, but you brought up Mo Better Blues. Can I just
please?
I'm gonna go with Mo Better Blues just because you said it. No, real talk. I had a couple of other things in mind that popped into my head just now, but Mo Better Blues was the first time that I saw Black, particularly jazz musicians, right? So it was this art. You saw these artists that weren't struggling with the art part. They weren't on, particularly when they showed jazz musicians, they're always on heroin or the money ain't right. These dudes used to wear suits in the street. The money wasn't the issue. It was this goofy inability to conquer their own kind of sexism and ideals of what a woman should be. And like they're dealing with patriarchy and goofy kind of it was just a wonderful study. I don't know if he intended it to be that, but it was a wonderful study on on how patriarchy kind of fails everybody. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But I've never seen us artists not be in struggle and wear shiny, bright, colorful clothes. And it was just like, wait, no one's gonna die? No one's like, you know what I mean? We got out of it. There's no like hip hop soundtrack. There's no like for the 90s, like it was so many things that were just it. And particularly like Spike could have made 5 other Do the Right Things after Do the Right Thing. And he chose to go completely that way. And I just, that's, man, you Mo Better Blues. You just blew whatever I was thinking about out the box. That film does not get the love I think that it deserves, for sure.
It's a good one. It's really, really good. And I'm glad that, upon seeing movies for the first time, seeing it as an adult in my 30s at the time,
wow.
Just it's a much different context. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I see this with some experience that I can apply to it. And the movie that comes to mind for me, and this is almost, I used to use this for women that I dated. I'm like, yo, if you want to know me, right? So I'm doing all of this. And it's like, you should watch Have Plenty. They're like, have plenty.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm pulling references out.
Plenty. Woo.
Yeah.
So you went.
Uh-huh.
That's a deep cut. That's an album cut.
It never fails when they come back after listening to after watching it. They're like, huh, that makes sense. I'm just like, all right. So this is the last one. This is the last one I got for you.
That have plenty. You just messed me all the way up. I gotta dig in my DVDs tonight for that one. That's cheese and bread. That's not even on streaming for real. Anyway,
factual. So I referenced her earlier, and that's the person that I'm generally trying to impress when I do any of these interviews. I'm trying to impress myself, obviously, but when I'm doing these interviews, I'm like, all right. If she comes to me and say, "Yo, I listened to that episode. It's pretty good. Dug it." I'm like, all right. It's almost like you have that one friend. You're like, "Yo, so here's this hip hop song. I think it's really good." It's all right. It's like that one hip hop hit you can't impress. So if you're trying to impress anyone with your creative work, who would it be?
Me. Like, I'm really, even now, super hard on myself. I don't want to say I hate everything that I do, because I don't. But to impress me, I'm super, I'm trying to figure out how to be less on myself, you know what I mean? Less hardcore, letting go, like doing those exercises of just kind of making things and timing yourself and being like, you have to stop at 3 minutes. But it's helped over the years. But like, when I could nod at something and go, you know what, it hits spiritually and it works technically. Like, if I could do that, ooh, that's heavy. That's strong. And let it out into the world. That's a huge deal for me. Like, everyone else's opinion. I mean, of course, my partner, but me and her, like, you know, she's admitted, like, no, I thought it was going to be whack. You were right. I'm like, well, then I can't, you know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I take it. That matters, but it's not like I'm way harder on myself. She's been one who's pushed art that I've been sitting on out into the world. Like, you stop playing like this. Like, get it out. What are you doing? So, yeah, me. That's a
very Aquarius answer. So that's kind of it for the conversation, for the interview. So in these final moments, I want to do two things. One, thank you so much for being a part of this pod. This has been just a pleasure. And
thank you.
Yeah. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to tell folks where to check you out, social media, website, any of that stuff. Shameless plugs, if you will. The floor is yours.
All right. You can follow me on Exit the Apple on Instagram. I'm not on X, Twitter. I mean, I think I have something there, but I don't deal with that. Exittheapple.com. You'll get all of the mythology, all of the new self-care, artistic inspiration tools are there, and we're constantly adding more as this thing evolves. And that's about it. Actually, I have a documentary coming out. So yes, it's a documentary that I did the animation for and worked on creatively, called One Person, One Vote by Maximina Jusson, a documentary about the Electoral College and the history of it as it pertains to Black bodies. So that is an amazing documentary. Please support it. Please go see it. Please vote. I'm not saying I know what a vote does and I know what a vote doesn't do. Do all the other things and vote also. You know what I'm saying? Like, and vote. That's it. I feel like I've occupied too much time. If you search for me, you shall find. And I'm constantly creating, and you'll see my name popping up in a myriad of places in the next couple of years as projects that I've been doing start to find their way into the world.
That's great. There you have it, folks. I want to again thank the impressive Pierre Bennu for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.